popular iPhone application, Yik Yak, is creating controversy at American University. This is the second time this school year that the university has faced a problem with Yik Yak. Trey Yingst is in the studio with more. Trey?
Thanks, Emily. I'm here with Professor John Watson and student activist Tatiana Lang. Thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I want to start out with you, Tatiana. Can you start out by explaining to our viewers what Yik Yak is and how the hashtag #RealAU, the Real AU, got started?
Well, Yik Yak is an anonymous app where people can post pretty much anything they want anonymously, and then people in the vicinity, so that's how we know it's people at AU, can either upvote it or downvote it based on if they agree or disagree or support it. And I guess the racist Yik Yaks at AU are one of the things that prompted us to do the hashtag campaign, the Real AU, which is kind of just showing the difference of how AU markets itself versus the actual experience of Black students at AU once we get here.
So I want to take a look at one of these Yik Yak posts and see if we can pull one up here. One of them reads, quote, "First you bring Ebola here, then you start riots and destroy our cities. Fucking go back to Africa." What does that mean for this community?
What it means is that there are people who aren't brave enough to tell us these things to our faces, but there are people who still harbor some pretty extreme and racist views that they feel comfortable enough talking about in an anonymous situation. So that's what Yik Yak does. It empowers people to say these kinds of things because we can't figure out who in particular they are.
Professor Watson, as an educator here at this university, how concerning is this, and is the administration taking this seriously, in your opinion?
Well, I think the university administration takes it very seriously, but there's very little you can do when you're dealing with how people feel about issues and express themselves about various issues. Yik Yak is particularly problematic because let's say you get 300 or 300 posts from Yik Yak. They could be coming from one single person. It could be a person who is not affiliated with the university, but who has the ability to get close to the physical grounds of the university. So that limits the field of potential people to maybe 300 million. So it may be unfair to link that person with the AU community, except for the fact that they are causing a reaction. And that reaction, believe it or not, is not necessarily bad. I think it's good for young students of every race to recognize that racism, or the expression of racism, is not isolated, that sadly, for the rest of your life, you will have to deal with that. And this is a learning environment where you can learn how to put that in its proper perspective. Ignoring it is not putting it in its proper perspective.
Tatiana, how do you feel about Professor Watson's comments? Is there racial undertones at this university that aren't being talked about? Although the Yik Yak app can apply to a large group of people, do you feel it's coming from university students?
So I mean, Yik Yak isn't the only racist experience that Black students at AU face, and that's why we're confident in accusing their university of harboring undertones of racism. There are plenty of examples of microaggression from professors, other students, and what I would call macroaggressions, such as writing the N-word on Black students' doors in Anderson, which happened a few weeks ago, among other things that go on at AU. So I think Yik Yak is one of the ways that we can screenshot something and bring attention to the issue, but I don't think at all that it's the only reason that Black students are offended and are calling out AU for its racism.
And I understand this isn't the first time something like this has happened with this application?
Right, so after the non-indictment of Darren Wilson and a few small demonstrations at AU last fall, that's kind of the first time we addressed the Yik Yak situation as students. But I think there have been racial undertones on Yik Yak ever since. The only reason we decided to do the Real AU campaign now is just because of the culmination of a lot of things. We just felt it was time to bring attention to the issue of race again. Yik Yak is kind of a secondary thing. It's not the only thing.
I was in Ferguson the night that the grand jury decision was announced. There were a lot of young people there, a lot of people from universities that said, nothing's being done to solve this problem. As a professor here at American University, do you feel that AU is taking the appropriate steps to solve this issue and these underlying problems?
Racism is a deeply rooted historical, cultural, moral problem, okay? And it has to be addressed. And no one knows the way to solve it, to cure this country and its individual members of racist attitudes, okay? The university, so far as I understand it, is trying to address it. But no one has found the formula for finding an antidote to this. It's going to be a long and painful struggle. And this is one of the reasons why I talked about how it's important for minority students to learn how to deal with this. This will probably be a part of their lives forever, forever.
As a minority professor, how do you speak with students and explain to them, you know, I've faced the same things that you're facing right now, and this is how I dealt with them, and this is how, as an educator, I can move forward? Yeah,
surprisingly, I've been here 16 years, and I don't think there's been a single year when at least a half dozen students, some outside of the School of Communication, have buttonholed me to tell me about individual events. And sadly, the best I can say to them is, get used to it. Don't merely endure it, but bulk up, get strong, and realize that you have to push back. But recognize that you can't push back at everyone, because not everyone is against you. A lot of people here are genuinely in support of anti-racist behavior. The secret is to recognize there is a threat, but the threat is not universal, and you have to find a way of figuring out who your true allies are and who the true threats are. And there's no formula for doing that. It's just, you can't shut down, you can't go live in your mom's basement, you can't get an automatic weapon and attack everybody who doesn't look like you.
Exactly.
You just have to find a path, a rational path, that is moral and just, but not complacent.
Exactly. Tatiana, the group The Darkening here on campus, how are they dealing with this threat, and are there future plans for similar protests as we saw? And we'll see if we can bring up the graphic here. Recently, the Yik Yak screenshots were actually printed out and put on the entrance of American University. Are there any future plans for something like this?
So we are mainly focusing on what we want from the administration, what we want from AU. And that's pretty much mandatory education around race and cultural sensitivity and mandatory training. Because I think, as Professor Watson said, it's a really deeply rooted issue that just talking about it won't actually solve. So, yesterday actually, we advocated for a bill for the Senate to pass for mandatory education for all student government officials, and that passed. So we're working on a bunch of things like that we can get for AU students and professors and everyone at AU, because racism is something that we all deal with, whether you're Black, white, Asian. If you grew up or consumed media or history in this country, that's what you're going to know.
Well, I want to thank you both again for joining me. Tatiana Lang, a student activist, and Professor John Watson, thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Back to you, Emily.
Up next, an interview with a member of the military on this year's Marine Corps Marathon.